So you've finished getting through customs in Quebec City. How did you get to Edmonton, and what happened when you got there?
Well, we had to take the train across Canada, and it was a train which we caught right in Quebec City. It wasn't very far from where we had landed, and it was a 5-day train trip on wooden seats, no sleeping accommodation, and we slept on the wooden seats whenever we could. But I recall we had to stop in Toronto, which was not much to see, but I subsequently, in my days of study, became familiar with the group of 7 painters, and I must say that in the train I saw all of the landscapes that they had painted through central and northern Ontario, and it is quite a nice sight to see so many different formations of land and forests and water and rivers and lakes. Holland was very flat, interesting in its own way, but very flat, and here we saw different geologic formations. We had to stop in Winnipeg to refill my father's morphine prescription. That's not why the train stopped, but we took advantage of it because we had a prescription that my mother had filled so that my father would be free of pain on the remainder of our trip into Edmonton. Well, our first sight of Edmonton was the bridge across the North Saskatchewan River, which was west of Fort Saskatchewan. And immediately after the bridge was way high up above the North Saskatchewan River, we first saw the smokestacks of the Gainers or Canada Packers meatpacking plant in northeast Edmonton. And there was a water tower there, I recall, and it's still there. And the train slowly made its way to downtown Edmonton, where we disembarked. There were people waiting there. They were called landmen, who were members of different churches, for the immigrants who belonged to a church. Well, our family did not belong to a church, so they had nobody to help them. All we did was get our belongings and followed everybody else to the immigration hall, which is where we lived for 6 weeks. Again, separate quarters for the men and boys, and then the women and young children and the girls were kind of in a semi-private with about 6 or 8 couples. And again, bunk beds. There, 2 things I recall. One was a nasty fall that my brother Robert had within a week and a half of moving in there. And he fell on some glass on the playground and ended up in the Royal Alexandra Hospital. I visited him a couple of times. My parents no doubt worried about the poor chap, but Robert was happy. He got apple juice all the time and ate apple pie, and he didn't want to leave the hospital, I recall. My dad had worked within 10 days. He went with his tools, couldn't speak English, but he was able to demonstrate quite proficiently what he was able to do. So that was one worry that was out of the way. He got work right away. The nasty part, or the bad memory, it's not a bad memory for me, but I have a confession to make, and that was there was a table tennis, but it was a tennis table for table tennis in the basement of the immigration hall, and the kids played there all the time. And one day I was playing, and I was chasing a ball that had gone awry, and I had to step on it by accident, and of course it was badly damaged, and you couldn't use it again. Either the same day or the next day, I made my way down to Woodward's department store about 3 blocks away, and found the sporting department. Well, I had no money, couldn't speak very much English, but I knew what a ping pong ball looked like. So I picked up a package of 3, stuck it in my pocket. I knew it was wrong at the time, and I walked out of the store, or at least I should say I tried to walk out of the store, but one of the floor walkers must have seen me and nabbed me at the door, and I was able to tell them I lived in the immigration hall, but I didn't speak very much English. And a few minutes later, Mr. Pike, who was the manager and janitor at the immigration hall, an English chap, came down and explained to the fellow what had happened, and nothing happened to me. I don't think my parents ever found out. Mr. Pike was quite a good chap about it, and he said, well, don't do that again, and we continued to play table tennis. We lived in the immigration hall for 6 weeks, while my parents tried to find a permanent place to live, or to have it in of our own, a house to rent or a suite to rent somewhere for a family. And I recall with Mr. De Bruin and my dad and myself, we walked through different parts of Edmonton to see if we could find a house. We didn't for a few days, so I decided at the age of 10 I would take it upon myself to look after my family, to try and find a place to live. So I took the bus. It was bus 5 all the way down Jasper Avenue, and then it turned at 124th Street and continued on to 118th Avenue. And I remember all of this. I then got off the bus and decided to walk up and down the streets and make a note of all of the signs that I could see on the front of houses. Well, one of the houses was really nice. It was on 123rd Street, I think about 116th or 117th Avenue. And so I wrote down the address, and I wrote down exactly what it said on the sign because I didn't want to make any mistakes. But I was ecstatic when I came back to the immigration hall and told my parents, well, look at this nice house I found. And I described the house, and it had a white fence and everything. But they didn't know what the sign meant. So they asked Mr. Pike. Well, Mr. Pike came up and broke out laughing right away. He said, it says wet paint. So much for my house hunting abilities. But eventually we did find a house. And it was close to the airport, close to H.A. Gray School. And it was owned by a lady called Mrs. Budnick, a Ukrainian lady, a widow. And we occupied the main floor, and Mrs. Budnick lived in the basement. She had chickens, half a dozen chickens in the backyard, and we had fresh eggs. At Christmas time, our first Christmas in Canada, of course, my parents were saving money to try and buy a car or buy a house or both. So they didn't do much for Christmas gifts. But the Ukrainian lady down below and some of her family members bought Christmas gifts for the kids. And I remember Robert and I got a small football. We had never seen a football before. And that was just a memorable thing, how wonderful we were treated by Mrs. Budnick and her family. At the playground, I made friends and taught them to play soccer, while they in turn taught me to play baseball. The winter came, and we had to learn how to skate. I had never skated in Holland. Everybody skates on canals. You see them in pictures and movies, but Robert and I never skated. But we bought a cheap pair of skates, and because I couldn't skate well, I played in a hockey league at school and was put in goal for obvious reasons. Well, the good part of it was that I was a pretty good team player, and I tried to fit in wherever I could. And the team had a couple of hotshot hockey players. They were Ernie Takis and Lorne Schultz, and I remember them because they became hotshot football players at Vic Composite, and they played at the university for the Golden Bears in football at the time that I was at the university as well. So I remember my first meeting with them. Anyway, the principal chastised the hotshots for being bad sports about something that happened, and held me up as an example of a good team player. So I was very proud of that. I took grades 1 to 4 in Holland, so I would have passed into grade 5. However, because of my language difficulties, I was put back in grade 2 rather than grade 5 that I should have gone into. So in 1 year, I finished grades 2, 3, 4, and 5. I was permitted to go to the blackboard to demonstrate arithmetic problems because I had taken decimals and fractions in Holland, so it was fairly easy for me to kind of demonstrate to the kids how these things could be done. There was a social studies class as well, where kids were invited to bring news stories from time to time. And I remember, early 1952, so it would have been February. The February Winter Olympics were on. And the Edmonton Mercury hockey team had won the World Championship, the gold medal. And so that was the story that I thought was most important. And when we all presented our story the next day in school, of course, mine was cited as being the most important. And so I fit in very, very easily. Discrimination, there was none. My friends helped me. They helped me correctly pronounce words, and if I wanted to point to something, what is that? They would explain it to me and teach me how to say it properly. And my brother Robert was the beneficiary of the same type of assistance. So I remember those fellows well, the Eichelbosch twins and Dale Charlton and Barry Hurd. Audrey Lund, I skated with Audrey Lund once, and Audrey Lund ended up marrying Bruce McGregor, who was a hotshot hockey player that ended up playing for the Detroit Red Wings. So that was my love life the winter of 1951-52.